Hi everyone, it's me, it's Chiara. So if you are new here to my channel, I am Chiara, as I said. I'm from Switzerland and I am talking about mainly about mental health and my eating disorder recovery journey. So today I wanted to talk a bit more about how I beat my eating disorder and also about my journey to Canada. Um, and so, just that I said it, I want to put a trigger warning here. I am not sure what I'm going to say yet, or like how much I want to go into detail, but just that there is a trigger warning. Like, if you are unstable at the moment, or I don't know, just consider if you want to watch this video if you are not in a good place, please. And also, I'm going to tell you about my travel journey to Canada because it's a very interesting story, but also a very long story, and I think it's worth telling. But if you don't want to hear it, just skip. Because, as I said, it's a long story. So, as I mentioned previously in my first video, everything started with my big relapse in 2018, in the early 2018, sorry. As I said, I was doing very poorly back then, and I was only able to start recovery with the help of my mom and my therapist. And throughout the course of 2018, I found an eating disorder treatment center in Canada via Instagram. It's called Westwind Eating Disorder Recovery Center. It's in Manitoba, Canada, Brandon specifically. And I got in touch with those people, and at first I was like, I don't know if I want to do this, like even the financial part and stuff, and like it would be a very long journey. I would be so far from home. But I would say by the middle of 2018 I became determined to go there, and I started to save money, to collect money through donations. And by the end of 2018 I actually had the money they requested for a 3-month stay. And I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was January 5th when I went to Canada. We started actually very early in the morning. We drove from Lucerne here in Switzerland to Zurich Airport, also here in Switzerland, which is about an hour drive, so not a big deal. And it all went very smooth in the beginning. I had checked in online previously. I said goodbye to my parents and to my beloved dog Mia, and I went to the gate. Everything was fine. I found everything pretty easily, and I sat in the plane by the time it was, I think it was something in the morning. And so as soon as I sat in the plane, everything started to go wrong, like very wrong. And it all started with a flight attendant. Like, no offense, it's not the flight attendant's fault at all. But you know that space where you put your luggage up, that thing came off, like something broke, and she suddenly held like a piece of the airplane in her hands basically, and like that was just she was just standing next to me, and I was like, oh, what now? And so she started to make phone calls because I'm pretty sure they can't fly if like something is wrong with the plane, like, and it was just that little piece, so like to a normal person it's not a big deal, but I think that's just protocol. And it took about an hour until the pilot gave a speech through the speakers, and he told us that actually he didn't mention the piece that came off, but he mentioned an incident that a woman had suddenly fallen ill and they had to remove her from the plane and take to the next hospital. And also protocol says that they have to that the luggage of the person that stays on the ground has to stay on the ground too. But the problem was they already had all the luggage in the plane, so they had to open the plane again and to look for that particular luggage, and that took around another 1.5 2 hours. And by then, like, there was a very big snowstorm back then, and the plane was already covered in snow again, and so they had to defrost the plane again, and that took, I think, another hour. And in total, I think there was, about 3.5 4 hour delay. And I knew I was making calculations all the time, because I knew I had I think 4.5 5 hours layover in Toronto. And by the end, by the time we landed in Toronto, Canada, I had left from that original 4 or 5 layover. I had left a little less than an hour, and was like, oh my god, I have to get my next flight. And like, you have to keep in mind, I had never flown alone. I had never traveled alone before, let alone such a far distance. And I had never been to Toronto before, never been to the airport before, and I had no idea where to go. I had to ask my way through, and I also had to hurry, like really hurry. And on top of all that, I had caught a very bad flu. I had problems breathing, and yeah, the people there at the airport weren't very nice. Like, to me, they were very impolite and unfriendly. Like, again, no offense. I'm just telling you my experience, guys. And so, yeah, I had to run. And by the time I made it to the gate, like, I actually found it in time, like really on. I was there really exactly on point. Like, if I had been there a minute later, I wouldn't have caught my next flight. But oh wonder, I made it. And I was so short in breath then that I couldn't talk anymore, I couldn't speak anymore. And the flight attendant actually had to take care of me. They had to get me some water, and I was a mess. I was so covered in sweat because, again, I had the flu. I was so exhausted by then already. And I was sitting in the plane and thinking, oh, I made it, like, what can go wrong now? But believe it or not, that wasn't everything at all. Like, that's not the end, by far not. So it was very late in the evening when I landed in Winnipeg, Manitoba. I think it was around 8 p.m. in the evening, and I went straight to the place where you can get your luggage, at the airport, and I was like, oh, cool, I'm going to get my luggage, then check in at the hotel, and yeah, very easy. But turns out it wasn't that easy. When I got, as I say, to the place where you can get your luggage, there was nothing and no one there. It was like abandoned. And it was like, what is happening? And so I heard my name over the speaker, and I had to go to the info point where they told me that my luggage hadn't made it with my plane because the flight from Zurich to Toronto was so delayed. But they told me that wasn't a problem. I could go to the hotel and just wait until my luggage came, like they would deliver it. And I was like, okay, so let's do that. And I checked in at the hotel, took a taxi, a cab. Yeah, you say cab, right? And when I came to the hotel room, I was like, cool, I'm going to relax. But it struck me then that I didn't have anything with me. Like, all my medication was in my luggage, all my clothes, I couldn't even brush my teeth and not even take a shower, but was the worst part of it all was that I didn't have my medication that I needed because of the flu. And so I was like, oh, that's just very bad. Like, I was so desperate. On top of that, I had a very bad jet lag. It's a 7-hour difference from Switzerland to Canada, or from Canada to Switzerland. And yeah, so I just waited, tried to sleep a little bit, which didn't work. And at 3 a.m. in the morning, I called the reception and asked them if they already have my luggage, because they told me they wouldn't deliver my luggage later than 12 p.m. because they wouldn't want to wake me up. But because I asked for it, they delivered it, and I was very relieved to have my luggage because I could take a shower and take my medication. And oh yeah, also on top of that all, I was going to treatment for my eating disorder, and I was still mentally, especially mentally and physically, very unwell. I was barely able to eat throughout that very, very exhausting journey because everything was new. I had so much stress and everything, and I was getting just weak. But yeah, at least I thought I have my luggage, everything is fine. The next day I went to the airport again because I had to take the shuttle from Winnipeg to Brandon. And so I thought, yeah, what could possibly go wrong now? So I waited and I waited. And actually, because I had never been to Canada before, I had no idea how that shuttle looked like. And so I was standing in front of the airport, I was waiting. And it was, by the way, it was so cold. I think it was that day, it was about -40, between -40 and -30. And so actually the shuttle, because as I later found out, they thought they had to pick me up at the hotel I had booked, but in fact I had booked for them to pick me up at the airport, so they mixed something up with that. And so the driver drove by me, and I was like, but because, as I said, I didn't know what that car looked like, and I didn't realize too that that was my shuttle. So it was like, yeah, just like everything got mixed up and stuff. It was a mess. And after like 2 hours had passed by, I went to the info point, and they told me, like, they called the driver, and they were already on the way and stuff, and they couldn't return and pick me up, and that I had to wait another 2.5 hours for the next shuttle. And by then I was like, oh, no way, right? And but yeah, I couldn't do anything else than just wait, which I did. And so as it turned out, the driver wasn't there before, like, I think 3.5 hours later, because I don't know what exactly was the problem, but they were delayed and stuff. And also like, this driver just had so much luggage with him, not even people, just so much luggage. He had to kind of get all of that stuff into the trunk, even into even like on the space of the seats, like, and I was like, what is happening, right? And so I went to that driver and told him, like, that I had missed my first shuttle, and that I would come with him, because they had told me at the info point that it was okay. And like, he was obviously very distressed, and so he just basically snapped at me and told me that was not going to happen because he didn't have me on the list. And I was like, but I couldn't even talk to him, and he was just like shutting me off. And like, by that point I was just so it was so nerve-wracking for me, and not only for me but also my parents, who were so scared. And I just broke down crying, and I couldn't do anything else than just cry. And the nice ladies on the info point went out to talk to the driver, and then he came up to me, told me, like, are you this person? And I said yes. And then he told me it was okay, I could go with him. And by then I was so relieved. I can't describe that feeling. Like, I was just, oh, okay. And as we drove to Brandon, it's about a 2.5 hour drive. Suddenly everything went dark. Like, I was looking outside the whole time because I was so fascinated by the prairies, and everywhere you would look, you would just see snow. And I was just like struck by the width of that landscape. Like, it was beautiful to me. But suddenly everything went dark and white, and it was like, what is happening now? And then, like, the driver started to talking about something about the blizzard, and that was so scary to me because I had never been in the middle of a blizzard. I had never even seen a blizzard. And like, it was just very windy, and you could see the street was already covered in snow, and it was kind of scary. On top of that, it became to get dark outside. It was around, I think it was around 7 p.m. when I finally arrived at Westwind Eating Disorder Recovery Center. And I was so exhausted I went straight to bed. Like, it was all like, it had all been so much, like just way too much. But also my parents were like, they told me when I was back home a couple of months later, like, you know, we were so worried. We didn't sleep for 2 nights straight. And yeah, we basically had to recover for the next week or something. Like, yeah, that was my very messy travel journey from Switzerland to Canada. But yeah, it was all worth it. And also, afterwards, I was just thinking, like, I don't know if you're religious, maybe you are, maybe you're not, but I was just thinking someone or something was testing me, how much I want to get there, how much I want recovery. And you know, in my eyes, I passed that test, because at one point during that travel journey, I was just like, I could just return and go home, because I don't even know if I will ever make it there. Like, that's how desperate I was. But I kept going on. I didn't give up, and you know, in the end, it was all worth it. The 3-month stay was worth it. Like, yeah, I was very glad I didn't give up back then. And yeah, also the next 3 months weren't easy, but they were very meaningful to me. Like, I learned a lot of very, very meaningful stuff there. Yeah, as I mentioned before, the first thing basically they did at Westwind was giving me that book from Jenny Sheffer called Life Without Ed. And I read it in a few weeks. She has a very light-hearted writing style, and even for people who cannot speak that English that well, like, of course you have to own the language a little bit, but not too well, because it's, as I said, it's written very light-hearted and easily. And yeah, I made a lot of friends there. I went out to see places. Like, in the first few weeks I was pretty scared to go out, because like, I was anxious, because I didn't know if I could talk to people, because, you know, the language barrier, I wasn't fluent by then. And I also had a couple of panic attacks while being outside. And on top of that, like, the weather was so crazy. It was so cold. Like, the coldest I have seen there was -56 with wind chill, -49 without wind chill. And like, you can tell I never experienced something like that. But actually, because so many people had told me already in Switzerland that I had to get good clothes, I did that. And like, I had, on top of that, like on top of my very heavy jacket I had, I wore like a couple of layers every time I went out. Couple of socks, couple of trousers, couple of shirts. Yeah, that was the only way you could survive there. That was my experience, at least. Yeah. And yeah, what was I going to tell you? Yeah, the first time it was very hard, because up to the point I traveled to Canada, my mom had been in charge of everything I ate and how much I ate, and I basically had to learn how to feed myself again. Like, I had to learn what is a portion, what goes into a balanced portion, with the help of nutritionists, dietitians, yeah. And also the staff that was very helpful. And I also felt like there was no rush. Like you didn't have rules or something you had to, like, there were rules. But for the first time when I was in residential treatment, I didn't felt like I was under so much pressure to do everything right, because if I didn't, I would get kicked out. And I felt I could be very open. I can talk very openly to the people there, and it was a very, very supportive environment. Even like the patients there, like everyone was so supportive. We were cheering each other on, and rather than like constantly competing with each other, which was mainly the experience I had made in Switzerland. Like everything was just so different, and that was so new to me, and people cared about me, and it was so familiar. Like Westwind is a very small treatment center. Like there are only 5 beds, as I know. Like it's more like a small, like a little family or a big family, and yeah, that was just the experience was very, very unique to me. And yeah, I started to, as I said, be less anxious about going out and stuff, and eventually I would go even downtown on my own. We would go to the mall, we would go to hockey matches together, which was very fun. We would go to the movies once a week for like just a couple of dollars, which was so mind-blowing for me, because here in Switzerland you pay so much just to go to the movies once, and we could do that every week. That made me so happy. Like, yeah, thinking about it is still so mind-blowing for me. And yeah, actually I also once did a road trip with 2 friends to Winnipeg, which is also a very, very good memory I have. And slowly I learned, like, as I say, to feed myself again, to enjoy food, to like to do ERPs. Like we had to do every week an ERP. An ERP is basically a challenge you do every week. Like going out to eat, or wearing tight clothes, even if it is just for 10 minutes or something. And yeah, challenging fair foods, of course, and having sessions every day, and dietitian sessions every week. I talk to my parents a lot, to my family, like Skyping and stuff. And I was just, yeah, I felt like still I had so many meltdowns over food, over the scale, over my weight and stuff, and my body was changing and all. But by the time I went home, I was like, this is different. Like when I traveled back home to Switzerland, from Canada to Switzerland, I was actually able to sustain myself throughout that flight, and that was so mind-blowing again to me, because compared to how my first journey was, like if you don't consider all the stuff that went wrong, and just look at the eating stuff, like it went so much better, and that was such a big relief for me. Like that made me so happy. And even when I came home, I continued to work hard on myself, and to do challenges. I was determined. I was committed to recovery, just committed. And that was something I only had picked up at Westwind. That recovery to me was a commitment, a complete commitment, and to do whatever it takes to stick to that. And it was hard. It was hard for a long time, but it eventually became easier and easier, and I started to enjoy life more. Like, I still had my problems. Like, I think I mentioned it in my first video too. I'm traumatized. I have various other problems, mental health problems, but I felt like almost like there had been a weight taken off my shoulders, because now I could actually focus on my underlying issues and not having to basically fight for your life all the time. That was just like a different life for me, and it was so new in the beginning. It was so new and mind-blowing, and like suddenly I could see the world in colors again. That was how it felt like for me. And yeah, for that I'm very, very grateful. I'm so grateful for Westwind, for the stuff. I'm grateful that I was able to do that journey. Like, if I hadn't been able to do it mentally as well as physically, I wouldn't be here now. And yeah, that was just a little bit more about how I beat my eating disorder. And maybe if you want to leave me a comment, and you could tell me what you want to see next in my video on my channel, yeah, that would be great. See you soon, guys.